Strength, noun. The quality or state of being strong, capacity for exertion or endurance. Despite the listed 9 definitions for strength, this is probably the one we all think of, the physical side of strength. And when Sena is introduced as a short but swole hammer-slinging warrior, that's the strength that is affiliated with her character. Physical. Even among the other 8 technical definitions, only one of them talks of something internal or mental. Physical strength is a definite asset of someone that can lift a hammer the same height as themselves, but it is some other strength that is the focus of Sena's story. Some other strength that she struggles to identify that she wants to work on and improve that is unrelated to getting gains. What is strength, and how does Sena want to be strong? Throughout her time in Colony Theta, Sena focuses on training, and training specifically by herself. She does individual drills with her hammer, and other soldiers ridicule her for it. Compare that to what we see in the Colony 9 gang's past. They did team combat drills with 6 total people, and even outside of that, we consistently see people training against each other. Sena's training is just alone. She does this at least in part because of Mio, whose independent training and excellence results in subsequent praise. Sena deduces that this praise is born out of Mio's strength and independence. So she focuses on this independence, continuing to train by herself. Strength training and conditioning is Sena's favorite hobby, and it's something that you can do completely by yourself. You can make progress and exert yourself towards personal improvement, even easier when your hammer can transform into a dumbbell. Ironically, this quest for independence and recognition leads Sena to being pretty dependent on Mio, wanting to mimic Mio's traits and actions to become strong like how Sena sees her. Mio tells Sena to just be herself and find her own strength, but that's just a bunch of nonsense. Either way, let's pencil independence down as a factor in strength. Winding back to the Colony Omega accident, while Mio is trying to wrap her head around Miyavi's sacrifice, Sena is obsessed with this idea that she could have done more, that if she was truly strong, then these catastrophes could be avoided. This is a trend that continues throughout the main story, and it's a mentality that I can't really blame her for. She's being trained as a soldier for her entire life. Everything revolves around strength and personal prowess. Being strong and useful to your side of the war is the overarching personal goal of any of the characters caught up in it. The same thing is seen when Mio is insulted at the premise of being an officer rather than a frontline soldier. These guys strive to be useful, and the way to gauge their use is battling for strength and the higher-ups recognizing that strength. So add competence to the list. Getting others to recognize that strength is also difficult for Sena. Either to have consistent irony in her design or because she's tangentially related to blades, Sena's outward appearance does not change. She cannot appear strong on first impressions. She remains the scrawny, short goblin creature regardless of how much strength training she does. Even after being a part of the Agnian Special Forces, she laments how she isn't treated with much respect back at Colony Gamma. That despite all the work and training she's done, she receives no recognition. Which then circles back to point number 2. If Sena isn't being recognized as strong, that must be because she isn't doing enough, that she isn't pulling her own weight. And to do better on that front, she needs to train, which she, again, does by herself, reinforcing her sort of desire of independence that eventually becomes loneliness. Loneliness will then mean she's less likely to get recognition because she simply doesn't talk to enough people. It becomes an unhealthy negative feedback loop that Sena forms into her overall belief of what being strong is. These 3 concepts of strength permeate Sena's entire journey throughout Ionios, even though being a part of an Ouroboros is, in of itself, something that is not independent. Sena rarely talks to her Ouroboros partner about any internal issues, and only slightly clues in Mio at all. She doesn't really want to accept help because in her eyes that would be a weakness. Asking for help would show that you are not competent and that you are not independent. So instead she just keeps quiet and tries to stand out as much as she can, letting her actions show how useful she is. Lanz tries to crack her at times but is never successful, and only really just insults her.
You seem so lonely.
Oh, wow. Rude.
Sena is a member of Ouroboros. It is an absolute requirement that you work alongside someone. If you don't, and you can't even properly confide in your partner, of course you're going to feel like your contributions are lacking, because you're not fully utilizing the tools available to you. Sena is only able to activate her cool spider monkey Ouroboros after directly asking Lanz for help, although that is immediately cast aside as she feels guilty and responsible for wrecking a food hall. That instance of asking for help does seem to be little more than a blip on a radar in Sena's mindset, as she still rarely discusses anything with Lanz and continues to believe that she is useless.
And these feelings don't seem to inherently make sense. Sena is a really good fighter, and she's one of the 6 people responsible for saving the world. However, a lot of her feelings come from the company that she keeps around. Sena is much, much better than the average Ionian soldier, but she doesn't hang out with the average Ionian soldier. She hangs out with 5 people who are just as good as her. And so Sena constantly compares herself to those 5. She compares herself to 5 other people whose job it is to save the world. And in believing that she's less than those 5, she believes she's less than the 50 or 5,000 other soldiers out there. It's very easy to get lost in that inferiority mindset when the only people that surround you are also very exceptional. I mean, sure, Sena can break, topple, launch is one of the most fun classes to play in the game, but Lanz, he can change to the Signifier class. And the situation can only get worse if Sena doesn't properly confide in anyone and convey how she feels.
You okay there? Can I help out?
Those feelings just build up, and while she does sort of confide to one person later on the story, we'll circle back to that one later.
Now, some of Sena's quietness is on Lanz's hands as her partner. Eventually, in Ligart prison, Sena does start to open up to Lanz. She mentions how she's jealous of the confidence that Lanz and the others express. But Sena doesn't properly know how all these people feel about themselves, and Lanz himself is someone who now shares his own lack of confidence. He shares how he pretends to be strong to amp himself up beyond his weakness. So regardless of the strength she sees in others, Sena needs to realize that's not the entire picture, that she can't actually get in someone else's head and see what imperfections and insecurities they have. She'll only ever see her own unless she actually talks to people and forms a good relationship with them and not staying alone for the sake of independence. It is also in this conversation that Lanz mentions becoming strong for himself. Not for others, not for praise or recognition, for himself. That is something that Sena definitely needs to borrow, finding her own purpose because it's the path she wants to be on.
Alright, we are getting somewhere. There is now a partner that Sena feels comfortable confiding in. They have a bond of trust that they can build on this supposed weakness of themselves, and we're now starting to dissuade that idea of independence being so important to being strong. The issue is there are still those other ill-conceived notions about what it means to be strong, especially that one that you have to have some worth to show for it, that you need to have some sort of output of your strength because you are designed to be a soldier in a war, that you have to battle, you have to win. All that strength training you do, being a member of Ouroboros, it all has to measure up to something. And so during the battle with N, Sena specifically reaches out to Lanz and hatches the plan to pilot their Ouroboros into overheating and creating an annihilation that will take out N and themselves. A suicide run is exactly what they measure their worth to be. That as long as they get this one, as long as they get this kill, throwing away their lives, the connections they've built with Mio, Noah, and all the others, it'll all be worth it. This is the way they believe they can make an impact.
The thing is, the duo even acknowledges that this may not be a one-to-one trade.
This'll buy you some extra time. Use it!
Just a little more time. A little more time for those who are more talented, more important, and more strong. They're only the sidekicks in the story after all.
And in that moment, Sena is content with her impulsive, reckless decision. Despairing over her strength is what brought her here, and she was now going to use all of it for this one thing. Only for it to fizzle out, to be cast into prison, and resume the despair of uselessness.
Now, while the prison scenes are very good for No and Mio, they do kind of glance over the fact that Sena and Lanz just tried to kill themselves. At this point, would one even classify that suicide attempt as strong? Sure, there is strength in being a martyr and that willingness to sacrifice yourself, but in this case it lingers on the line of reckless abandonment, where the reasoning Lance and Sena had came about because they were so stuck inside their own heads. That willingness to sacrifice themselves also indicates that Sena has moved beyond wanting recognition. You can't be praised when you're dead. There's still that nasty measuring your worth based on some kind of output hanging over, but progress is progress. Ironically, Sena finally receives what can be seen as validation of her strength from Mio when they are in prison. Mio has consistently given Sena praise, but it is finally when they are brought down to their lowest point that Sena truly feels the weight of those words.
That connection with Mio is what makes Sena's life infinitely more valuable than any sense of duty or strength could possibly muster.
The true Uno reverse comes from the fact that this praise that Sena truly believed to come from Mio and caused her to break down was in fact not from Mio. Instead, it was from M, who had truly only watched what Sena did. The praise did not come from anyone who knew Sena. It came from basically a stranger. So in a weird way, it is the sort of recognition that Sena had been seeking. Recognition that she only sort of believed after a failed attempt at a contribution, at a failed attempt at suicide, even if M is referring to more than just that. Now, Sena and Lance don't get much time for the rest of the story on this issue. When they face Mobius X, who thwarted their suicide attempt, the villain is not even given a dying cutscene and just withers away.
Sir, if you have a complaint, I suggest you submit it through our email system. I would be happy to refer you to our website.
You are done. Fired. Do not show your face at the laundry again.
Still, hopefully Sena has been given enough time to reflect now. She hopefully realizes that while abandoning that thought of independence equaling strength is good, she needs to do it and ask for help in less self-destructive ways. We do see some progress in that regard in the acquisition quest of Number 7. After feeling responsible for Number 7 being hurt, Sena takes it upon herself to talk with the injured soldier robot alone. She wants to independently handle the situation and take responsibility, something that really has not gone away since the very start of this game. She also wants to show usefulness off the battlefield, doing more than just whacking the bad guys around. However, she,
Information stored in growth modules are also expunged at the time of birth. And not ascertained purpose of question. I have no name.
She kind of freaks out because Number 7 is so bizarre and isn't really a human, so Sena doesn't know what to do. She runs out crying over the pressure and regroups with the rest of the gang. With work still to do, Sena does reach out to the rest of the party for how best to communicate and understand Number 7. After they all put their heads together, Sena still has this sort of core idea to make food as an apology. The group also agrees to have the other 5 in the room with Sena and Number 7, but just to watch and not to intervene. A good allegory for how Sena needs to think about things in general. You can be independent and take on whatever you can, but if you need anything, your friends are always there, and it's no sign of weakness for them to lend you a hand. The ensuing conversation with Number 7 goes fine, with Sena even taking the initiative to give her the less artificial name of Sagiri. It's a sort of moment we haven't really seen from Sena. She can be more assertive and independent, but not to a fault right now. Not to the point where she's too paranoid to use the resources available to her. Going forward to the actual Colony Zero battle, it is finally Sena who talks her mind to a console. She finally has that confidence and spark within her. She really has never been involved with these side colony liberations, and her only class inheritance has been for Gondor, because she talked with her, and Riku Minana, because someone had to take it. It took until the literal last hero of the game for Sena to be the adjacent to a hero quest. And it results in a nice sort of changing of the guard, where Sena spent all this time looking up to Mio, and now she kind of has someone that looks up to her.
Is that an order? Never stop being you. Okay? From now on, Sagiri, the only orders you should follow are your own.
But there we go. Sena has a much better mindset when it comes to being strong and reforming her previously held concepts. But wait, there's still several more attributes of strength that the game discusses, and we haven't even talked about Sena's side story yet. So let's wind back to earlier in the story with the one person Sena properly opens up to before prison in Shania. The duo are similar but not exact. They both desire to get some validation for their fighting efforts. Sena's validation has some external focus in Mio and her group of friends, but it does seem to mostly be an internal validation to herself. That being a soldier and a member of the world-saving Ouroboros means she has to be stronger and more useful. Shania, on the other hand, seems to be mostly facing an external conflict. That being the daughter of a founding house of the city puts immense pressure on her to succeed. In striving for that success, she also copycatted Gondor along the same lines that Sena copycatted Mio. Shania received the same message that Sena did, that it's not worth her time to copy someone and she needs to be more herself. Gondor's rough language may have lost it in translation, but the intent is there. However, regardless of where their motivations came from, Shania and Sena both come to the same conclusion in the end: killing themselves. Shania sort of cracks under the pressure. Despite being an Ouroboros reserve, Gondor's imprisonment at least gave her a chance. It gave her a chance to carry on the bloodline and the success of her family and hopefully reach those external sources of praise. But now, 6 randoms show up and take the Ouroboros stone, and who knows when the next one's gonna come along. That seems to be the tipping point. The tipping point where the search for external validation leads Sena to just want a blank slate, or canvas if you will, where that need doesn't exist. Finding delight in the prospect of infinite rebirth and infinite tries, Shania becomes a part of Mobius's world. Even better, she becomes Mobius herself, which is fantastic for me because I was worried she was going to get off without being able to beat her over the head with a hammer. When word of Shania's re-entrance and plot to destroy the city reaches the party, Sena is legitimately determined to fight. She seems very ready to take responsibility for a problem she saw coming and stop it. Again, this is like the first time we've really seen this in her side story, where she has that willingness to go in, get business done, even if it's someone that she used to get along well with. Gondor also shows that strong determination to finish business with Shania, and Sena respects that, saying that Gondor is very strong unlike herself. Meanwhile, we get a bit more clarity on the external pressure in Shania's life, as her mom in the city is kind of a bitch. She uses Shania's dead sister as a sort of leverage to project the family's legacy onto a girl who just wants to paint. On their way over, Gondor brings up how her own strength is somewhat a product of luck, that she had physical gifts that put her on track to be an Ouroboros candidate, and she just continued refining and practicing them. She seems to say that if she wasn't born with this innate strength, then she wouldn't be strong and have that attitude that Sena admires. Which is a strange thing to say this way in a video game. Like, don't get me wrong, she is right. I could have practiced to be the best basketball player every day of my life, and I still would not have the natural genetics to at all match up against top-tier NBA players, maybe even bottom-tier NBA players who have put in similar time and dedication.
Get him out of there!
I just find it weird that this goes against the standard video game theme of, you can do anything you set your mind to, kids. When only 6 people get selected as Ouroboros candidates, the margins are so slim that at some point there's things beyond your control that will affect your placement. You can put in as much work as you can, face all the pressure put upon you, and it still may not be enough. There might be something that you just don't have and you can't explain why. The game does redeem this message by reframing it more as play to your own strengths, which is a much better way of presenting this idea. Shania doesn't have the innate talent of Gondor. She doesn't have that physical gift or drive to save the world. Whether she uses powered fists or a pistol, it doesn't matter. She's never going to be truly into it because her talents lie elsewhere in a much more benign field. And if that's where your talents are, why bother trying to do something different? Especially when you really don't want to do it. The party goes to the city, they beat up Shania, and the day is saved. Shania doubles down on saying she and Sena are nothing alike. Shania wants to simply erase the world and be done with the pain it has brought her, while Sena has that kind of ideal of tearing down the world in order to reshape it and better herself instead. I do think it's interesting how Shania's dad was overall supportive in her artistic endeavors. Even when he was alive though, Shania was still giving more into her mother's pressure rather than her father's. The negative, undermining feedback from her mother overcame the positive, reaffirming feedback from her father. Even if the mistakes of her and her mother made her unable to achieve those artistic dreams, Shania still leaves with a smile. Across the adventures and all the altercations Sena has been put through, she hopefully realizes that all these notions of strength are nonsense. But good on Sena for realizing there is something beyond physical strength that she needs to be strong. Something that we can honestly boil down all three of her misconceptions into. Confidence. If you can achieve tasks, you will gain confidence. Even more if you were able to do them by yourself. If other people praise you for your work, you'll gain confidence. Achieving these three things was Sena's idea for gaining that belief in herself. Her inability to find confidence intrinsically led her to believe that she wasn't pulling her own weight. That to be instrumental to success, she'd have to do something beyond rational. And that's really what Sena's development boils down to. That despite being able to lift up a hammer and bench press more than anyone else, she still lacks confidence in herself. It takes a very long time before she finally has the confidence to take on the issue of Shania about to destroy the city, to have the confidence to talk her mind to the consul at Colony Zero. It takes time, but confidence, reaching out to others, and acknowledging that her nonsensical versions of strength were wrong were all keys in Sena being able to change the way she wanted to. And I mean, that lack of confidence in itself is so bizarre in a way. Sena, you are the Agnian Special Forces. You shouldn't necessarily need other people to tell you that you're pretty damn good at whacking other people with a hammer. You are also a member of Ouroboros. You are, at worst, the sixth most important person in the world, because without you, the world is gonna just keep being in the endless now and everyone's life would suck. Lands needs a goddamn power frame to keep up when lifting with you. These feelings of lack of confidence are never rational. They never make sense, but they're there and you have to still try to work around them. Instead, shifting the goal to find your own strength and confidence that you truly believe in. That you don't compare your traits to others simply believing them to be perfect or have the traits you lack. They don't lose that confidence over failure. That you play to your own intrinsic strengths because they are there, whether you acknowledge them or not. To have the confidence to better those strengths day after day, striving for something that, even if unattainable, will still mold you into a better person. Just like a lot of things Xenoblade brings up, there's no switch to flip in your brain. A change in mindset is a process. After saving the world and defeating a literal god, Sena describes her contributions the only way she seems to know how.
We weren't half bad as a team, were we?
Yeah, passable, for sure.